Welcome to Shatter.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. Honey, intimacy once a month only. That's what she said. Calm, casual, like she was setting a house rule about recycling bins. And she went right back to sipping her Starbucks, scrolling her iPhone as if she hadn't just gutted 5 years of marriage in one sentence. I didn't respond. Not a word. My hands tightened around the edge of the table, but I didn't slam it, didn't argue, didn't beg for clarification. Inside, something fractured, but not the way she thought. It wasn't heartbreak. It was clarity. She thought she'd drawn the line, carved out a contract where my needs were negotiable and hers were permanent. She believed I'd nod, swallow the rejection, and keep playing the role of the patient husband, the provider who paid the bills, carried the weight, and accepted crumbs when she decided to toss them my way. But the silence I gave her wasn't surrender. It was the sound of the rope snapping. Later that night, we climbed into bed like nothing happened. She turned away, back lit by the glow of her phone, scrolling Amazon, laughing at something on the screen. I stared at the ceiling, chest hollow, replaying her words over and over until the meaning burned itself into me. Once a month, like rationing affection to a prisoner. She thought intimacy was hers to allocate like pocket money. I could have confronted her, demanded answers, demanded more. But what would that make me? A beggar at his own table. No. That night, I decided something else entirely. She didn't notice the shift. Not at first. The next morning, I didn't kiss her forehead before leaving for work. Didn't text her during the day to check in. At dinner, I let her talk about her canceled meeting while I stared at my plate. No jokes. No smiles. Just silence. The silence unnerved her. I saw it in the way she glanced at me, waiting for sarcasm or irritation. But I gave her nothing. And nothing weighed heavier than any fight ever could. That week, I started going to the gym again. Not for her. For me. The iron clanged in my hands, sweat rolled down my back, and for the first time in years, I remembered what it felt like to push myself for myself. I came home late, stopped at Waffle House instead of rushing back to eat her takeout scraps. When she finally asked, her tone was careful. "You're late." I looked at her, steady, detached. Didn't realize we were on a clock. She blinked, thrown off, and for the first time in a long time, she had no response. That was the pivot. The moment she realized control wasn't a one-way street. And while she was still calculating how to keep me under her thumb, I was already stepping off the board entirely. By the time she poured herself a glass of wine and curled up on the couch to watch Netflix, I was in the other room, drafting a plan that would turn her casual cruelty into the spark that burned down everything she thought was secure. Because I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't negotiating. I was disappearing. She didn't notice it the first day, maybe not even the second. At breakfast, I sat across from her reading the news on my phone. I didn't ask if she wanted oat milk in her coffee like I used to. I didn't crack a joke to lighten her mood. She filled the silence with chatter about her manager, a canceled meeting, someone's birthday. I nodded once and went back to my screen. She kept watching me, waiting for the smallest reaction. But I gave her nothing. That night I came home late. I had stopped at the gym, then taken the long way back, the hum of my Ford F-150 filling the dark roads while I thought about what came next. When I walked through the door, she was already staged like an actress preparing for a scene. Hair curled, satin robe, wine glass half full, Netflix paused on the home screen. She said I was late. I said I didn't realize we were on a clock. That moment hung between us like a crack in glass. The next day, she tried harder. She set the table with pasta she hadn't cooked in months, even lit a candle from Target, like she was reviving the ghost of our old life. I sat, ate quietly, thanked her. I didn't compliment the food. When she reached across the table, her fingers brushed mine, a gesture that used to mean closeness. I pulled my hand back without even looking. The silence swallowed the room, heavier than any insult. She started texting me during the day, short messages that used to be mine to send. "Hope your morning's going okay. What do you want for dinner? Miss you." I didn't ignore them, but I didn't give her what she wanted either. My replies were sharp cuts. "Thanks. Doesn't matter. All good." Each word a mirror of the indifference she had shown me for years. By the end of the week, she was unsettled. I saw it in the way she lingered by the door when I left for work, like she wanted to say something but couldn't. I saw it in the way her smile faltered when I didn't return her glance. She had always built her control on withholding. Now she was on the other end of that silence. and she was starting to taste how it felt. But the real shift came one night when I walked in later than usual. She was waiting in the kitchen, arms crossed, trying to mask the edge in her voice. She asked who I was with. I shrugged and said just people. The word cut deeper than I expected. Her eyes flickered with something I hadn't seen in a long time: fear. For the first time in years, she realized she wasn't the center anymore. And while she scrambled to hold on, I was already loosening every thread she thought tied me down. I knew the exact moment she started to panic. It wasn't loud or dramatic. There were no tears, no shouting, no slammed doors. It was quiet, subtle, but I caught it. She called me at work in the middle of the day. That had never happened before. Her voice sounded light, but it was stretched thin. She said she just wanted to hear my voice. I paused, asked if everything was okay. She said yes, she just missed me. I let the silence linger until she filled it with a nervous laugh and ended the call herself. That's when I knew it wasn't affection driving her. It was fear. Fear of the distance she thought she controlled turning into something she couldn't. That evening I came home later than usual. She was dressed up, like we had plans. We didn't. She mentioned a new restaurant she wanted to try, her words tumbling out quickly. I calmly took off my jacket and told her I had already eaten. The disappointment on her face cracked through her mask, just for a second, before she forced a smile. She said, maybe tomorrow. I nodded once and walked upstairs. She didn't follow me. 2 nights later, I shifted the finances. Quietly, without fanfare. Part of my paycheck rerouted to a private account. Subscriptions she depended on canceled. That night, when Netflix failed to load, she sighed loudly from the living room. She called out that something was wrong with the account. I didn't answer. I heard the silence stretch into the walls of the house. For the first time, she was left to sit with inconvenience alone. By the end of the week, she started to show cracks. She lingered more. She watched me change clothes, scanning receipts in my pockets as if folding laundry gave her the right to investigate. I didn't flinch, didn't call her out. I let her stew in the ambiguity she once weaponized. On Saturday night, I went out again. She asked where. I said with people. Her lips tightened, eyes narrowing like she wanted to demand more, but she didn't. When I came back, she was sitting in the dark living room, lights off, waiting. Her posture stiff, her wine glass untouched. She asked why I had been gone so long. I told her I lost track of time. The way her jaw clenched told me she didn't believe it. But the truth didn't matter. What mattered was the reversal. For years I had been the one waiting, wondering, second-guessing. Now she was the one pacing the floor, refreshing her phone, desperate for a notification that never came. And I wasn't done yet. She thought the silence was heavy now. She hadn't felt the weight of what was still coming. I didn't expect to find anything that night. I wasn't snooping, not really. Her phone was on the charger by the bed, screen lighting up with notifications. She was in the shower. I told myself I wouldn't look, but the screen lit again, and curiosity cut deeper than restraint. It wasn't a name I recognized, just initials. But the preview of the message stopped me cold. It said she wished she could get away more often, that she missed last time. My pulse slowed instead of quickened. That was the strange part. I wasn't shocked anymore. I was calculating. I didn't confront her. I didn't storm into the bathroom demanding answers. I simply let the message fade and put the phone back exactly where it was. When she came out in her robe, hair wrapped in a towel, she smiled faintly like nothing had shifted. And maybe for her, nothing had. But for me, it was confirmation. The suspicion I had ignored for months was now carved in stone. The next day, I started laying groundwork. I went to the bank on my lunch break, moved money into places she didn't know existed. I contacted an old friend in real estate, asked about short-term rentals. My coworker asked if I was planning a move. I just said maybe. That was enough. The plan wasn't about rushing. It was about precision. At home, she began circling me like a hawk that had lost track of its prey. She asked why I was getting up earlier, why I spent more time at the gym, why I wasn't eating the food she left out. I answered with vague calm. Better routines. New habits. Nothing for her to grab hold of. She wanted arguments because arguments meant she still mattered. But I gave her silence, and the silence grew heavier by the day. One evening she dressed up without explanation, slipping into heels she hadn't worn in months. She said she was meeting a friend for drinks. I nodded, didn't ask which friend, didn't ask where. The lack of reaction rattled her more than if I'd pressed her with questions. She left in a rush, And when she came back hours later, her smile was brittle, forced. She set her purse down and glanced at me like she was testing the waters. I stayed focused on my laptop, not even lifting my eyes. She wanted control, but it was slipping through her hands faster than she realized. And while she scrambled to maintain the facade, I was already 3 moves ahead, watching her unravel in silence. The storm wasn't hers alone anymore. I was shaping it. I knew his name before she ever said it out loud. It slipped into her messages, always hidden under initials or vague references. But one night, when she left her laptop open in the kitchen, it was all there in plain text. His name, his company, his promises. She thought she was careful. She wasn't. And that was her first mistake. I didn't confront her. I didn't let her know I had seen. Instead, I did what I always did best. I calculated. A quick search told me everything I needed to know about him. He wasn't some untouchable figure. He was reckless. His business wasn't as clean as he pretended. Creditors at his heels, tax filings that looked questionable, a history of lawsuits buried in the back corners of court records. He was sloppy, and she was blind enough not to see it. So I gave the right information to the right people. Not my name, not my trace. Just an anonymous envelope dropped where it needed to go. A small push to speed up what was already inevitable. The cracks in his empire widened, and soon it began to crumble. She didn't understand at first. She came home one night, distracted, flustered. She poured herself a glass of wine, scrolling on her iPhone, her lips pressed tight. She muttered something about how people could be unfair, how rumors could ruin good men. I stayed quiet, rinsing my plate in the sink, watching her reflection in the kitchen window. She was spiraling, and she didn't even know I was standing at the center of the storm. The following week, she left the house twice in a panic. She dressed in a rush, talking fast into her phone. I didn't ask where she was going. She wanted me to ask, wanted me to pull at the thread. I didn't give her that satisfaction. I let her spin in circles while I sat calm, detached, a ghost in the house she thought she controlled. One evening, she came back late, her makeup smudged, her hands shaking as she set her purse down. She didn't meet my eyes. She poured another drink and sat silently on the couch. For the first time in months, she didn't reach for her phone. She stared at the blank television screen like she was waiting for it to speak. She had no idea how much I already knew. No idea how far I had stepped away. While she clung to a man who was falling apart, I was already living in a future without her. And that was the quietest victory of all. She thought she was hiding secrets, but the truth was, she was the one standing exposed. It started small, the way these things always do. A missed laugh at the dinner table when she tried to tell a story. A cousin's raised eyebrow when I stayed silent instead of covering for her. People notice absence more than presence, and my silence was becoming louder than her voice. We went to a family barbecue one Saturday, the kind of gathering where she usually performed best. She dressed carefully, smiled wide, told her stories about how busy she'd been, how independent she felt, how strong her new routines made her. But there was a problem. I wasn't playing along anymore. I didn't chime in with support, didn't add details to make her sound good. I just sat back, answered questions when they were directed at me, and let the gaps in her story hang in the air. Her sister asked if we were doing okay. I simply said, "I've been better." The words were soft, calm, but they hit like a hammer. Her sister looked from me to her, confused. My wife laughed nervously, saying I was just tired, but the suspicion was already there. She hated it. For the first time, her performance cracked. The following weekend, we went out with friends. She tried again, slipping into charm, ordering drinks, tossing her hair like she was 21 again. At one point, she leaned too close to a friend's husband, laughing a little too hard at his joke. Normally, I would have clenched my jaw, forced a smile, played it off. Not this time. I excused myself, walked outside, and stayed there. When I came back, the air had shifted. A friend muttered, "Does he even care anymore?" right within her earshot. The look on her face told me everything. At home, she accused me with her silence. The way she banged plates in the kitchen, the way she moved around the house, it was all designed to provoke me. But I wouldn't bite. She was unraveling in front of her family, her friends, and I didn't lift a finger. The real moment came at a Sunday dinner with her parents. Her mother leaned in, frowning, and asked if everything was all right. Before my wife could answer, her father cut in. "You really thought no one would notice?" The table went quiet. She froze, eyes darting to me, waiting for me to save her. I took a sip of water and stayed silent. That was the shift she never expected. For years, I had been her shield, her silent fixer. Now, without my cover, the truth was visible to everyone. She wasn't the admired wife anymore. She was exposed, and she felt it more in that moment than in anything I could have ever said. The silence between us became its own language. She tried to fill it, at first with small gestures, then with desperate ones. She invited friends over for dinner, hoping their presence would force me back into the role I used to play. I stayed polite, courteous, but detached. I didn't join in their laughter, didn't rescue her when her stories fell flat. They left early that night, glancing at her with confusion, at me with quiet recognition. She noticed. She felt the shift. She turned to her family next. I overheard the phone calls, her voice softer than usual, asking her mother to stop by, asking her sister if they could go shopping. The responses grew colder each time. Too busy. Maybe later. She didn't realize how transparent she had become. People weren't blind. They were starting to see through the cracks. She couldn't hide anymore. One evening, she stood in the doorway of our bedroom, watching me pack a small gym bag. Her voice was sharp, asking if I was leaving again. I told her yes, calmly, without explanation. She pressed further, wanting to know who I was meeting, where I was going, why I was gone so often. I zipped the bag, looked at her once, and walked past without answering. The silence hit harder than any fight could have. By then, she had started to crumble inside the house. I'd hear her moving restlessly through rooms, cleaning, slamming drawers, playing music too loudly. It was her way of fighting against the void that had grown between us. But the void wasn't mine anymore. It was hers. At night, she lingered at the edge of the bed, sometimes reaching out as though to touch me, only to pull her hand back when she realized I wasn't turning toward her. She was suffocating in the same absence she once created. And the irony was, I didn't need to remind her of what she'd said months back when she treated me like an afterthought. Her own words echoed louder in her head than I ever could have repeated them. The isolation deepened outside our walls, too. Her friends grew scarce, her texts unanswered, her invitations ignored. The man she once whispered to had disappeared from her phone completely. She stood alone in the ruins of the life she thought she controlled, surrounded by silence that stretched from every corner of her world. And I was there the entire time, calm, composed, watching her unravel inch by inch, saying nothing. She thought silence was weakness. Now she was learning it was the sharpest blade I had ever carried. The confrontation came on a Tuesday night. She waited until I sat down, my dinner plate in front of me, the silence between us steady as always. She hovered at the edge of the table, arms folded tight, her voice trembling more from frustration than courage. She said we needed to talk. I didn't look up right away. I cut into my food, slow, deliberate, before I finally met her eyes. She accused me of being distant, of withdrawing, of punishing her. Her words spilled out fast, like a rehearsed speech she had been holding in for weeks. She said she felt like I wasn't even her husband anymore, that I was acting like a stranger in my own home. I let her talk. I gave her nothing in return. The silence made her unravel. She demanded to know if there was someone else, if I had already moved on. She stepped closer, trying to force me into a reaction, trying to draw me into the old game where she controlled the rules. I put down my fork, wiped my mouth, and looked at her. I told her calmly that she had already made her choices, and now she was just living in the results. Her face shifted, confusion replacing anger. She pressed harder, asking what that meant, begging for clarity. I stood, took my plate to the sink, and washed it slowly while she hovered behind me. The sound of running water was louder than her voice. When I turned, I didn't raise my voice, didn't argue, didn't explain. I simply told her I wasn't in the same place anymore. And then I walked past her, leaving her alone in the kitchen with nothing but her own questions. Later that night, she tried again, softer this time. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hand reaching toward mine, her tone pleading. She said she wanted to fix things, that she still needed me. I turned my head, met her eyes, and gave her a smile she didn't recognize. It wasn't warm, wasn't forgiving. It was final. I told her some things can't be reset. She froze, her hand still suspended between us, waiting for me to take it. I didn't. I rolled over, my back to her, and within minutes, Her hand dropped to the sheets with a soft, defeated thud. That was the first time she realized I wasn't playing hard to get. I wasn't pretending to be distant. I was already gone, and no amount of reaching could bring me back. The collapse didn't happen all at once. It began in fragments, small slips that grew into full cracks. At first, it was her voice breaking when she tried to sound cheerful on the phone. Then it was the way her friends stopped coming around, the way her texts went unanswered. Soon it spilled into the open, in front of people she once relied on to keep her image intact. We were at a dinner with a group of old friends, the kind of gathering where she used to shine. She laughed too loudly, interrupted conversations, tried to steer attention back to herself. But it was forced, brittle. At one point she reached for my hand across the table, like she was trying to prove something. I didn't move. The silence around that table grew heavy, and every eye was on her. She pulled her hand back quickly, the smile fading from her lips. That moment lingered longer than any words could have. After that night, her confidence bled out fast. At work, she struggled. She came home complaining that her boss had noticed her slipping deadlines, that coworkers whispered behind her back. I didn't say a word. I sat with a book in my hands, listening as her world shrank around her. Then came the breakdown in public. It was a Sunday afternoon at Olive Garden, a place she loved, a place she thought still held some magic for us. She insisted we go, smiling too wide, ordering wine like everything was fine. Halfway through the meal, she leaned across the table, her voice sharp with desperation. She asked why I was treating her like she didn't exist, asked if I wanted her gone. Her voice rose enough for the people at the next table to hear. I sat back, calm, letting her words hang. When I finally answered, it was quiet, controlled. I told her she was asking questions she already knew the answers to. The silence that followed was brutal. She looked around, realizing every eye in the room was on her, not me. For once, she wasn't admired, envied, or even respected. She was pitied. When we left, she walked a step behind me, her arms folded tight, her head bowed. The performance was over, and she knew it. The image she'd spent years building was cracking in places she couldn't repair. And I didn't have to raise my voice, didn't have to expose her. She did it all herself, with her own panic, her own unraveling. All I had to do was stay silent, and let the weight of her choices crush her in front of the very people she wanted to impress. The end came quietly, just like everything else. No screaming, no slammed doors, no dramatic speeches. By then, she had already run out of energy to fight. The woman who once strutted through life like the center of every room now moved like a shadow, restless and uneasy, always watching me out of the corner of her eye, as if waiting for a lifeline that would never come. I had already made the final moves. The finances were separated. The documents were ready. The apartment across town was furnished with only the things I needed. She didn't know it yet, but her silence with me would soon become permanent. The night before I left, she tried one last time. She came into the bedroom, her voice low, softer than I'd heard in years. She said she missed me, said she needed me, said she couldn't imagine life without us. She reached for my hand, her fingers trembling, her eyes filled with the kind of desperation that might have once broken me. But not anymore. I looked at her, calm, steady, detached. Then I pulled my hand away. She froze, staring at me like she didn't recognize the man standing in front of her anymore. And she was right. She didn't. The next morning, she left early for errands. By the time she came back from Target, the house was half empty. My clothes, my documents, my photographs, gone. Even the truck in the driveway was gone. Only the furniture she had chosen remained, sterile and cold. She dropped her bags at the door, calling my name, her voice echoing in the hollow space. No answer came. On the kitchen counter, I left the envelope. Inside were the divorce papers, already signed, with a note clipped on top. One sentence. I didn't disappear. I just stopped showing up where I wasn't respected. She read it, and for the first time in years, the silence wasn't mine. It was hers. I walked out of that life without looking back. No goodbyes, no final arguments. Just a clean cut, sharp and cold, the kind that doesn't leave room for return. As I drove down the highway, the horizon open in front of me, I felt no regret, no anger, no grief. Only clarity. She had built a cage and thought I would stay inside it forever. Instead, I had learned the power of walking away without a sound. And in that silence, I found something she never could, freedom. Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories.